Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first ever live webinar with Time for Learning Live. I'm here along with three other homeschool moms, and today we're going to field your questions about homeschooling and using Time for Learning. We all know it can be incredibly overwhelming to take on this adventure of homeschooling for the first time. So we just simply want to offer you the benefit of our experience, and hopefully that includes helping you not make some of the same mistakes we've made along the way, and just to embrace the fact that this is a completely legit thing you're doing. You're taking the education of your kiddos into your own hands, and you can do this. And we'll be here each week for a while to back you up. So we have four panelists today, including myself. My name is Carrie Jones, and as of this May, I'm now a homeschool alumnus. Both of my sons have graduated from homeschool, and my main focus these days is helping other families with the ins and outs of homeschooling in high school. I help administer a website specifically for homeschooling high schoolers called letshomeschoolhighschool.com, and I hope you'll drop in over there and say hi on our forum. And our other three panelists are Nicole McGee and Audrey Dunaire and Karen Hitchen, and I'm going to let them each tell you a little bit about their own homeschooling background. But while they're doing that, though, I want to make you aware of our Q&A tool. If you're joining us in our Google Plus event, then I hope you're seeing the Q&A panel next to your Hangout screen. And this panel is specifically for your use. If you just type in your homeschooling or Time for Learning related questions right in there, then our hope is going to be to get to as many of them as possible in the next 45 minutes. And when we do choose your question to answer, you'll get a notification letting you know that we're about to tackle that question next. So if you already have a burning question on your mind, go ahead and type that into the Q&A box as our panelists are going to introduce themselves. So let's start with our panelist, Nicole McGee. Nicole, if you'll tell us a little bit about yourself and your homeschooling journey.
Sure. I have three sons. They are in 6th grade, 2nd grade, and preschool this year. We began homeschooling. We're an Army family and began homeschooling as my son was starting kindergarten, and decided that with the military lifestyle and moving, and we knew that that would be happening frequently, that homeschooling was just a really great fit for us, enabling us time to spend together as a family with constant relocations and deployments, and that we could really work around the Army schedule that we have, and just decided we'd give it a shot, and we've never looked back.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole, for being here with us today. Our next panelist is Audrey Dunaire, and Audrey, if you'll bring yourself up on screen and tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey in the homeschooling world.
My name is Audrey. I am a homeschool mom. I have 6 children. 5 of them are currently homeschooling. Their grades are pre-K up to 9th grade. My daughter started the high school this year, and we've been very happy with it. This is our 7th year homeschooling, and each year we've been using Time for Learning since the beginning. It allows us to have more time together as a family, more time to travel, and we've been enjoying the journey.
Wonderful. Thank you. And our next and final panelist to introduce today is Karen Hitchen. Karen is another homeschooling mom and Time for Learning user, and I'll give her a chance to tell a little bit about her background with homeschooling.
Hi, I have 2 children that I'm currently homeschooling. We just started our 2nd year homeschooling. My youngest is a 3rd grader, and we brought her home last year from school. And my oldest just came home from school. This year will be her first full year at home, and she is in 8th grade.
Thank you, all of you, for being here today, and thank you to our viewers. Don't forget that you can, for those of you who are just joining us, if you want to submit a question to our panelists, all you need to do is use the Q&A box there and type it in, and you'll get a notification that we're getting ready to answer your question. So we're actually going to start out today's session with a question that came in prior to the broadcast, and this is from viewer Elena. And Elena has asked, I've just recently begun using Time for Learning for our 1st grader and our 3rd grader, and I'm really not sure I'm understanding how many activities a day I should be scheduling for my kids. Can you give me any advice on that? So each of us as moms has used, Time for Learning as their core curriculum. So I know we all have something to say about how we use the activity scheduler and how many activities we schedule in a given day. I think I'll start this question off with Karen. Karen, if you'll give us a little insight on how you schedule things.
Sure. I do it a little bit differently for both my kids. My 8th grader uses Time4Learning for 2 of her subjects. She's doing 2 high school subjects for 8th grade this year, and I, for her, did not set a schedule for her. She's kind of doing her own thing. So we just looked at the number of activities that are for each course, and then I divided that by the number of school days that we do. So that kind of gave her an idea of what she needs to do per day, along with all her other stuff. For my youngest, I did run the activity schedule, but I kind of threw it into my own Excel spreadsheet, which I can hopefully show. It's not working today for me.
Okay, no problem.
But what I did, basically, it's broken down by weeks, and it kind of just shows me how many she has to do per day, and then I broke it down even further by the topics. That way, if she's struggling with a concept, I can notate it myself, and we can either come back to it later, or we can stay on it for a few days.
All right. Would anybody else like to pipe in and tell anything about how many activities you schedule or how you work that?
We do a 4-day week due to my husband's schedule, so we do school Tuesday through Friday. And I do the same as Karen. We take the number of lessons for each subject and divide them. I do it by the number of weeks that we're doing school. And I give my children a schedule of how many lessons they are to complete in math, language arts extension, science, social studies, what other subjects we're doing. And they have an idea of what they need to complete. So for example, my 3rd grader will have 2 math lessons to complete. That can be 1 lesson and 1 quiz, or 2 lessons, depending on how it's set up. And then he knows he needs to go over to language arts, and he'll complete possibly 3 lessons in language arts, depending on how it works out. And then 2 or 3 lessons in language arts extensions. They also do the resources that go along with the lessons. So they have an idea of what they need to complete. I'm fine with however they want to divide it up. Some days they'll have 2 lessons, some days they'll have 3 lessons. So I'm fine if they want to do, more than 1 language arts and then save extensions for another day. They have the flexibility of deciding how they want to do it, as long as the work is completed by the end of the week. Some subjects take a little bit more time than others if they're not able to grasp a concept. So we're pretty flexible on, if something takes a little bit longer, we don't fall too much off track. I do give allowance for when we travel, when we go away, days off. So I always aim for May, and if it takes us till June to finish school, that's all right. It gives us an extra month of being able to get their work done.
That's great. Wonderful information, Audrey. Thank you for that. If anyone has just a general question about activities and how to schedule them, we do have the activity scheduler help video, which is in the Time4Learning hints and help page. And so if you'll just head to that page and click on that little video, it'll give you a real good rundown of how to generate a plan, to help to guide your child through the activities that you want he or she to be doing in a week or in a month. So great question. Thank you for that. All right, our next question also came in prior to the broadcast. And this question is, do you have a Spanish-English bilingual program? We live in Bolivia, and we're new homeschoolers with 3 children who'd love to learn English. Thank you. And this question is for Maria. Maria, Time4Learning currently does not have a Spanish-English bilingual program. There are a lot of tools, though, that you can use for learning English. One of the ones that I recommend is called www.vocabulary.co.il, and it is a tremendous free website for people who have English as a second language. There are just incredible numbers of activities, practice for both children of all ages and adults, and so I can highly recommend that site. So again, that's www.vocabulary.co.il, and that's a tremendous site that that I personally recommend, and I know Time for Learning does as well. Anyone else wanted to weigh in on that, whether you had any Spanish-English resources that you wanted to share? Okay, great. All right, so time for a little housekeeping then. We If you're just now joining us, this is our first webinar of the Time for Learning live Google Hangout series for new homeschoolers. And our set of homeschool mom panelists here are just ready to answer your questions that you have about homeschooling. We can't guarantee that we're going to have all the answers, but we'll certainly do our best to encourage you and maybe direct you to somewhere you can find help if we aren't able to help you. And if you're watching via our Google Plus event, then you've probably noticed the little Q&A panel next to the Hangout screen, and you can use this panel to send your questions to us, and we'll be choosing as many of them as possible to answer during the remainder of the Hangout. And if we do choose your question, you'll actually receive a notification letting you know that your question is coming up soon. So, back to our panelists. Let me stop and ask, I thought we might talk in just a minute before we take another question about learning styles. Learning styles becomes bigger and bigger in the homeschool world every year because homeschoolers have the unique ability to customize our learning and our curriculum to each student. And I know that there are three main learning styles that people refer to usually. A visual learner who learns more by seeing things, an auditory learner who learns more by hearing, and a kinesthetic learner who learns more hands-on. I've always said that my younger son, who used Time for Learning all the way through high school, was extreme visual learner, and the multimedia aspect of Time for Learning really, really benefited him. But as far as learning styles, I'd love to get your input, ladies, on how you deal with learning styles, how you take those into account, and in what ways you customize your education for your kids according to those. Would anybody like to weigh in?
I think all my children are pretty much visual learners. They do great seeing it, and watching. Time for Learning has some great videos of showing, especially like with the math, actually showing how to work out the problem and giving examples with fractions and things. And I think that really helps my children to grasp the concept when they can see it visually versus just reading the material in a book. My daughter, who just started the Time for Learning high school, she found that there was a transcripts button. So now, instead of taking notes while the video is giving her the lesson, she can read along the transcripts with the video and then use a highlighter to highlight what's important and go back and study those important notes for her test. So that has really helped her to be able to grasp the concept, not to have to keep stopping the video and taking notes, to actually take the notes while she's listening to the video and reading along. So we just kind of go by, you know, each subject, each child, each grade, it can change their learning style. But I definitely think that the visualization with Time for Learning has helped all of my children succeed.
Awesome. But I love that idea about the transcripts. That's such a good tip, Audrey. Anybody else?
My son is definitely, my oldest son is more of an auditory learner, and now that he's in middle school, we found that some of the lessons, especially science, social studies, those things are, they can be a lot of reading. So it helps him if I can sit with him and read and discuss things with him as we're learning. So I definitely try to fit that into our day, that we set aside time where he and I sit together and work on his social studies or science or any other subject where there's a lot of reading involved. If he has to read for too long of a time, if it's not something he's really interested in, his interest will definitely start to wane and he'll lose focus. So I definitely try to sit with him and help him with his reading comprehension as we're going forward with the lesson.
Great point. Yeah, absolutely. So I also will mention that one of my sons was a kinesthetic learner, and um, interestingly, a computer program actually worked pretty well for him because it was an the Time for Learning was enough of an interactive program to where using the computer helped with that kinesthetic thing. But I will also say that we had to do a lot of supplementing with projects and hands-on type things because of that kinesthetic learning style. And field trips were always more beneficial to him than my other son by far. He learned by doing and getting out there and experiencing, and it was just the fact of being involved in something made the learning stick for him. So I'll mention that as well because we may have some kinesthetic learners out there too. So thank you for that question. Our next question is from a current viewer, Christy. And Christy asks, how do you know what grade your student has at any given time? Christy, I'm not completely sure I understand that, but I'm going to make an assumption, and you correct me and clarify with another question if that's not correct. But I'm going to make the assumption that you mean, how do you find out what grade level your child is at any given time? I'm going to defer to some of the gals who have the younger kids because I know that can change a lot in the younger years. So how do you evaluate grade levels, or do you? Anyone want to weigh in on that?
I don't evaluate grade levels. It's more of skills. So mine, if she is already familiar with something, I'll usually just have her take the test, and if she passes the test, we move on. And as far as knowing like what the actual percentage or what grade she has at any given time, we just usually run a scores report for whatever date range I'm needing, and that'll tell me where she's at grade level for her score for whatever class that she's doing.
Awesome. Anybody else have a different method?
Well, we started from the beginning. So with my children, especially my third grader right now, he started from pre-K and moved up and completed the number of lessons. And he pretty much, did what he needed to do each year. And each year in May, we sit down with an evaluator. They go through the work, and he is signed off for the next grade level for the next year. So we just kind of go in order of Time for Learning as far as grade levels. As far as grades, I print a report based on their lesson quizzes and their tests to see how they're doing and to see what their grades. If any test is below, a 70 or an 80%, it all depends on the type of quiz it is and whether or not they can explain, why they got a test answer wrong. I sit with them, and if they say, oh, I forgot to carry the 2, I don't have them do the whole test over. I know that they grasp the concept. With homeschooling, it's not so much about grades, it's about understanding the work. So I don't put a huge emphasis on the grades as long as I have a good feeling that they know what they're doing and they know how to complete the work. I'm, pretty lax as far as that goes. So, we just go we follow the lesson plans with Time for Learning for first grade, second grade, third grade.
Yeah, I agree totally with Audrey and Karen in that one of the things about homeschooling to remember is that the grade level system is designed for a school setting. It's designed for the mass education and being able to know the progress and being able to put levels on things so that there is some kind of measurable progress. With homeschooling, that's not nearly so important. Grade levels, don't mean a whole lot, and at least not perhaps until you get into high school when you're starting to create a transcript for your child who you may want to enter college. But in the early years, grade levels are still sort of a product of the schools, and it's one that's sometimes hard to get out of our psyche because we grew up with it. But in the homeschool environment, unless and let me make this exception, unless you're planning on a short-term homeschool where you're putting your child immediately back into the public school program after this year, then that would more matter, and you would probably use some kind of testing, whether it be a standardized test or something, to evaluate which grade level your child is performing at. But But yeah, that's probably less important in the homeschool scenario, I would say, in general. So thank you, Christy, for that question. I hope we answered it, and if not, please feel free to send in a clarification question, and we'll try to grab that. Just a quick reminder for those who have joined us late, if you have a question for our four experienced homeschool moms, just put that into the Q&A app here on the event page, and it will appear for us, and we will select it. And when we do select it, it will send you a notification letting us know that we're getting ready to answer that question. So. And speaking of questions, one of the most recent questions that we received is from a current viewer, Michael. Michael asks, do you have to use the Odyssey Writer? Great question, Michael, because a lot of Time for Learning users want to know about the Odyssey Writer. They want to understand how it works and whether or not they need to use it. So I'm going to throw that out to one of the current users. Nicole, tell us what your feeling is about the Odyssey Writer and if you use it or not.
Truthfully, we do not use the Odyssey Writer. My son loves to write, and he writes his own stories and his own whatever he thinks of so often and so much throughout the week that when it's an assignment and he has to write something, it's like pulling teeth to get it to happen. So in order to have a more cohesive and fun learning environment, we don't do it. We skip it altogether. If there's something that I think he does need to write or work on, we talk about it, and we work that out. So he does end up doing some writing that he doesn't necessarily love, but he does so much writing on his own that I haven't found it necessary to use Odyssey Writer. And if he has to complete an assignment where he needs to write a paragraph or write something out, he does those things, but we honestly don't use it at all in our homeschool.
Gotcha. Anyone else?
We do use the Odyssey Writer, but we don't use it all the time when it comes up. A lot of times there will be a story that my children will read, and it'll say, now put your own ending to the story. And they'll use the Odyssey Writer as a place to give the story, their own ending as to how they thought the story could have ended. We find that if you use it all the time, it really, some of them, the assignments are very drawn out, can take several days to complete. And so unless it's something that my children have a really big interest in, we kind of try to stick to the smaller, or at least make it a little bit smaller. Even if they're asking for a whole story to be written, we kind of make it a short story type of thing so that they don't fall behind in their other work. But at least a few times a year we do try to do some of the larger ones, but we kind of customize it. For example, my daughter needed to write a report on a famous person, so we did it on a famous person that she chose, and we ended up doing it on Taylor Swift because that was something that she had an interest in, and we learned about the charities that she gives to and about the charities. And it kind of set it up where she can do the index cards and use some of the available resources within the Odyssey Writer to help her organize her notes and make the report the way she wanted it to be based on something that interested her.
Right. And I'll just mention specifically about high school and using Odyssey Writer. We did use Odyssey Writer a lot, and it's integrated a lot in the high school levels. So we did use it a lot. We did very similarly to Audrey, what she mentioned. We customized the assignments because some of them were very specific, and I wanted to give my son a little more leeway in his writing. But the nice thing, there were two nice things that I really appreciated about Odyssey Writer. One is because my son, as I mentioned, the one that's a visual learner, there were these graphic organizer tools that were built into Odyssey Writer that let you organize your thoughts visually before you started the writing process or alongside the writing process, so that you could take notes and line those up together and connect them with lines and circles, and it was just such a mind map way of thinking through writing, and that really helped him to get his thoughts together. So there's quite a few onboard tools that if you don't know about them, you might miss them. So it's a good thing to go to the tips and tricks page at Time for Learning and read all about what Odyssey Writer can do. But the other really nice thing I liked about it was that it quickly and easily let my son print out his assignments as soon as he had finished writing them, and that was easy to put in a portfolio, and also to, you know, just keep track of his assignments well, so that I could grade them offline. It was just a nice boost, and of course you could do that in any word processor. Odyssey Writer was just was helpful because of the other tools that were integrated, but it made it very easy for us, you know, to do that. I'll mention just one thing while we're on the subject of writing, which is if you notice that your child is needing some additional writing tutoring or help, and you're feeling like maybe you're a little bit, you know, unsure about the grading process or anything, Time4Learning has a sister site, Time4Writing.com, which has live certified teachers who can help your child in individual 8-week courses build specific writing skills, whether it's sentence writing, paragraph writing, essay writing, or even SAT essay writing. All the way from elementary to high school, there are these wonderful courses that are offered that are able to be taken individually, and you have someone beside yourself who is, you know, the person, the teacher of record that is teaching the student, and so it's just a really neat tool if that's something you're looking for. So in addition to the Odyssey Writer and the writing assignments on Time4Learning, definitely check Time4Writing.com out if you get a chance. So thank you, Michael, for that question. I hope that helps some. Okay, we've got another question. This wants to know, how long does it take until Odyssey is graded? That's another great question. A lot of parents and students believe that their Odyssey writers that they submit them into the Time4Learning system and that they are graded by Time4Learning. That is incorrect. The Time4Learning program, it always works with the parent being the teacher of record, and the parent is in charge of grading all writing assignments. So it's important to use Odyssey Writer only as a word processor tool to create your assignments and then save them, just to show that you've completed them. But it's a great idea to print them out or to let your parent access them via their own parent admin page so that they can go in and grade those themselves. So just keep in mind that the Odyssey Writer is not a graded exercise as the quizzes and the tests are other aspects of the Time4Learning program. So yeah, that's each Odyssey Writer assignment is specifically for the parent to grade. But let me ask at least one of our panelists how you handle grading Odyssey Writer, at least those of you who use it. Either Karen or Audrey, how do you handle the grading?
There's usually a rubric that is attached on Odyssey Writer, so that kind of helps me what to look for. My main goals for the Odyssey Writers is she comprehending the information that they want her to put together for it. So I look at cohesive information, paragraph structure, and obviously grammar mechanics, spelling, and whatnot. So we usually typically, when we do the Odyssey Writer, she will submit it. I'll send it back with corrections, and then she will redo it, and then she emails it back to me. So we shy away from letter grades or anything because my kids, from being in public school, that's really like detrimental to their self-esteem. So we really, I say, oh, it looks great, and we're done with it. So.
Great idea. Great idea. Anybody else have any other input on that? All right.
Yeah, I pretty much do the same as Karen. We go over it together. We look at what they were learning, especially since I have different grades. I don't expect as much, obviously, from my third grader as I would from, you know, a sixth or ninth grader. I look at their handwriting, their spelling, their grammar, and that it has the points of the paragraph that they were looking for in the lesson and what the lesson is looking for.
All right, wonderful answers. I hope that helped with your question about Odyssey Writer. Just a quick housekeeping for those of you who are just joining us. We are Time for Learning Live. This is our first webinar for new homeschoolers and new users to Time for Learning. And so we're here to answer your questions. We're trying to get to as many as possible, and we still have 15 minutes left of the webinar, so we hope to be able to get to several more before we close. So if you have one, just use the Q&A app there on our event page and submit your question, and we will try to get to that. And when we do, and when we select your question to answer, you'll get a notification that your question is coming up to be answered, and that way you'll know to be prepped and ready for our answer. So our next question comes from Tira, and Tira says, I have a high schooler using Time for Learning for the first time. How should parents be involved in the learning process? I know we have to look at the Odyssey writing assignments, but I want to make sure that I do all that I'm supposed to do to ensure his success. And I'm just going to say that's a great attitude, Tara, because a lot of parents, especially in the high school years, would prefer to be more hands-off. And wow, there's such a difference to me in having graduated two high schoolers in in the times in their high school journey when I was less involved and when I was more involved. And the times that I was more involved were definitely the times that they, made the bigger leaps in their understanding of things and got a little more enthusiastic. And I will say that I always saw my role for my high schoolers as less of a teacher and just more of a facilitator, someone who helped them to find the right resources that they need, that someone who had some experience with these subjects. I didn't feel like I had to know them in and out, but I had enough experience to be able to help them find the answers that they needed to find. And so my answer to that question would be to be very involved. And when my kids were in high school, what I did is I would go in daily, if not daily, if I didn't have time daily, at least a few times a week, and take an overview of what their lessons were in Time for Learning, how they were doing. If there was any, we had a policy, if they made below a specific percentage of something on a quiz or an activity, then we would talk that through and decide if they needed to maybe retake the lesson again to understand it better, or if they felt they needed some more additional information that maybe we could get outside of Time for Learning as a supplement to help them to make sense of those lessons that maybe they weren't understanding as well. And then yes, I graded the Odyssey Writer assignments and sent them back to them for corrections. And so I was very involved in the process. With that said, you can understand that Time for Learning is a lovely program in the sense that students can watch their lessons independently. You don't have to be there over their shoulder. You just want to be their support system and a strong resource and stay involved in their day-to-day and week-to-week activity. Anyone else want to weigh in on your activity level with your students?
Well, we just started within the last 2 weeks, and I've actually been very impressed with how independent my daughter is working on the high school levels by herself. She seems to have a very good understanding of the lessons and is grasping the concepts very well. What I do is I help her after she completes the test. We go over the answers together, and if there's anything that she gets wrong, like Karen said, the grade is kind of caused a little bit of anxiety with the kids. So what we do is she gives me the answers, I have the answer key, and then if there's anything that she didn't work out correctly, I let her know, and she goes back to trying to figure out why she got that one wrong. If there's a concept that she doesn't understand at all, we find other resources and we work on it together. So I have been pretty impressed with how independent she's been with it, but I am always there. I'm always in the room with her as she's doing her work. In case she needs any extra help, I'm there to help her.
Right. Great point. Wonderful. I hope that helped, Tara. And I'm sure there are as many different answers to that as there are people who use Time for Learning and other similar programs. But those are great questions. All right, we've got another question from Christy. And Christy would like to know, when they want to redo the questions from a lesson, can they skip the lesson and go straight to the questions without listening to the video again?
No.
Okay, answer Karen for us. Let us know.
No, usually if you're redoing one of the activity quizzes, not the chapter test or the end of lesson test, the ones that are actually attached to the lesson, you have to watch the video again. So unless it's a separate icon, you have to physically walk yourself through the video and then retake the quiz.
Right, exactly. That's very true. All right, next question. All right, here's one. We only homeschool from Monday to Thursday. Is there a way I can adjust the activity scheduler for just those days instead of having to add Friday to our schedule? I can only put a start and end date for the year so far. All right, who was telling me they use a Monday through Thursday schedule? Is that you, Audrey?
Yes, I do Monday through Thursday, but we ended up not using the activity scheduler the way it was on there. We made our own because when the kids needed more time on a subject, they always felt like they were falling behind. So if a math lesson, let's say they were supposed to do 3 math lessons a week or a day, and 1 math lesson was all they were able to complete one day because it took them a little bit more time, they kind of felt like they were falling behind, and that's not what I wanted them to feel. So we kept adjusting the activity scheduler for the day, and it just, for our family, it worked better to just tell them this is the goal, is to complete 3 a day, but we have not been able to use the activity scheduler to skip days and things like that because it does end up throwing off the rest of the year. So I haven't found a way, so I give my kids a schedule of letting them know how many to complete each day, but we don't actually use the scheduler through Time4Learning.
Anybody else have any experience with activity scheduler that you would want to share?
We used it in the past. We're not currently using it, but we have used it in the past. And I mean, I guess there's a way that if you wanted to go in before your week got started and say, okay, so for this week, we need to cover this series of lessons, you could have an activity schedule just for that week. You would just have to go in and create a new schedule every single week. That way you could see that on Monday, we need to get these things done. On Tuesday, this is what we need to complete. But that would be something that you would have to do on a weekly basis. So we don't use the activity schedule also because we school from Tuesday to Friday. So that's why we don't use it right now, because it doesn't have that option to leave out a day.
Great point. And I know there are constant improvements that are being made to the activity scheduler, and there are lots of requests for more customization, and I know that Time4Learning is definitely working on some different customizations and options that will hopefully improve your ability for different families to use the activity scheduler and to use it more effectively for your specific family. So stay tuned for announcements about that. Let's see. We've got just about 5 more minutes and just a few more questions here. So hopefully we'll get to them all. Our next question is from Jen, and Jen wants to know, how do I know how much time my child should spend on Time4Learning each day? So we answered this at the beginning, but for those who are just joining us later, let's just do a quick run through of just a general idea of how you decide how much time your child would spend on Time4Learning each day. If each of you will just go through quickly and just kind of tell how you handle that.
If we get started at the beginning of the year and we determine this is how many lessons need to be completed every day, then and he knows he has 2 math lessons and 1 language arts, then honestly he just does those. So I don't have a hard, fast rule. I know for my 2nd grader, he spends about an hour a day on Time4Learning, and then he has worksheets that he has to complete. He hops over to Spelling City and does his spelling assignments there. My 6th grader spends obviously more time, but when we divide the number of lessons that we need to complete on a daily basis, it really just kind of fills itself in based on the amount of work that he has to complete in that way.
Audrey, how about you?
Yeah, we also base it more on the number of lessons to complete, more so than the time. However, if I see that my children are struggling with a specific concept and we spend, let's just say, an hour on math on the first lesson, we're obviously not going to spend the next 3 hours continuing to finish the math lessons. So I kind of judge it based on how they're doing. And how many lessons they've completed. So it may take them an hour in math to do 3 lessons, and that would be probably a normal day. But as I said, if there's a lesson or a concept that they don't grasp, and we do other resources to try to get them, for example, multiplication tables, that's not something that they're going to pick up in one day. So we can spend 2 or 3 days just working 30 to 45 minutes on math. Even if they only get 1 lesson completed, that's fine. Because they got burnt out after that, that amount of time, and so we move on to something else so that it's not overloaded in their system.
Right. Karen, how about you?
I agree with them. I try to keep them as, for my youngest, I have to keep lessons pretty short just because she has some special needs for attention purposes. So we generally, like the others, we do it based on the number of activities that we have to do per day, but if she's exceeding more than an hour to 2 hours total for everything, we just stop and we carry it over to the next day.
Yeah, great idea. Yeah, there's just no pressure. That's the great thing about homeschooling. Just don't feel pressured. You've got flexibility to do things on your own schedule, to follow the rhythms of your own day. And so yeah, the key thing is just to keep working on it for whatever works for your family is the right thing. There's no right or wrong answer on that. So all right. Now, this one is not a question, but more of a comment. Cynthia says, I love the activity scheduler, and we often get ahead of it. So I keep the printouts of it as a record. And that's a great idea. I love the idea of keeping the printouts of the activity schedule as a record. We haven't talked a lot today about portfolios, but a lot of people in different states are required to keep a homeschool portfolio, and the activity scheduler, just like the reports, is just an additional type of way to track what your students are doing and what they've covered, and so it's perfect to keep those kind of things as a record. And then if you're more of an unschooler or more laid back and relaxed, you don't have to at all. The great thing is you've got the options either way to use Time for Learning how you see fit. So that's great. All right. Well, we're going to round up today's Time for Learning live session, but there might have been still some questions that you didn't get the answer to yet. So just know that we'll be back again doing another Hangout next week. Make sure to stay tuned to our Time for Learning social networks for more information on that. But just in case you didn't, get your burning question answered and you'd like to ask something right away, there's always Time4Learning.net, and which is the Time for Learning forum, where parents can go in and ask questions 24 hours a day, and we have multiple moderators of that forum, so your question is generally answered pretty quickly. And then another terrific source that we have for that is to learn about is the Time for Learning Families Facebook group. And the Facebook group is just, you can do it in your search box on Facebook, just Time for Learning Families. And there is always conversation going on in there where parents are asking each other questions and answering each other, and it's just a very wonderful community for talking with one another. And if you're already on Facebook, it's just simple to just jump on over there and ask your Time for Learning related questions. So there's plenty of ways to get your information and find out more. I want to say a huge thanks today to Nicole, to Audrey, and to Karen for joining me in today's webinar. You can often find us in the Time for Learning forum and on the Time for Learning Families Facebook group as well, so we hope to see you there. And then, of course, we really hope to see you back here at our next webinar. Stay tuned for announcements on when that will be next week, and get those questions ready. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you next time. Bye.